All right, go ahead, Koski.
Thanks, Greg. So today we are going to run this demo about the rate limiting policy in the context of Kuadrant. The demo is going to be quite simple in the sense that we are deploying one service as an API provider. Then we are going to apply some unauthenticated rate limiting. Later, we will add authentication. So with API key-based authentication, and last part of the demo will be looking at the rate limiting, authenticated rate limiting, looking at that and see how we can rate limit based on users, right? So let's go for that. So first thing to do as a API provider is to deploy my own service. As usual.
You want to share your screen?
Yep, sure. I think it's big enough.
Yep. See you there.
Okay. So first thing to do, as I said, is deploy my own service. As usual, it's Echo API, very simple. Here we see some deployment, deploying the Echo API, as usual, some service in front of it. So I'm going to deploy this. Okay, so usually, okay, here we go. The toy store deployment has been deployed. It should be up and running. It's creating the container. Right, done. The Toy Story service has been deployed. So first, let's create the virtual service to protect the Toy Store deployment. I'll show you the virtual service. So it's quite simple. We are defining some HTTP routes here, like get toy, like post some admin toy path, or delete admin toy. There are 3 operations there, all of them with a single destination, which is the service I just deployed, the Echo API, and everything under the domain of star or the subdomain of toystore.com. Okay, so I'm going to deploy this virtual service. Done. So in order to check that the service can be reached and we can hit the service with any security, we didn't apply any security requirement, any rate limiting, anything yet, but just to make sure that we can reach out the service, let's try to call one of the operations, which is a get toy. We can see that the service is reachable. Well, the request needs to have the host header. Otherwise, the service cannot be reached as you expect. If I change the host, you will get not found. So right, first milestone done. We have a service. We have some basic protection on that. I mean, nothing special. Only a gateway configured to access the service. Let's create the rate limiting policy for start applying rate limiting. The rate limiting policy we are going to deploy. I'm not going into detail, but wait, no. But it's basically some it applies some rate limiting policies. No, I will say another way. It applies some rules, 4 rules in this case. The first rule, this one, is about an authenticated rate limiting for a specific route, which is the get toy route. The second rule is for authenticated rate limiting for a specific user called Bob. So it's 2 requests every 30 seconds. The third rule is the same, but for another user, which is called Alice. And instead of 2 requests per 30 seconds, Alice has a higher plan, premium plan, and has 4 requests every 30 seconds. And last, there is one that's called global, because this rate limiting is applied to any route. So this is a global unauthenticated rate limiting for 20 requests every 30 seconds. So I'm going to apply this rate limiting. The rest of the rate limiting policy spec is about gateway configuration in order to enforce the rules I just explained. Okay, so I'm going to deploy this rate limiting policy. The rate limiting policy itself doesn't have any effect. We need a relation. We need to create a relation between our service and the rate limit policy. And in order to do that, what we do is to annotate the virtual service we just created before, and providing the name of the rate limiting policy we just created right now. So this is what I'm going to do now. Tell the virtual service, tell Kuadrant that this virtual service needs to be rate limited by this policy. So this is what we are going to do right now. So we are going to tell Kuadrant that the virtual service needs to be rate limiting by the rate limit policy called toy store. The Kuadrant controller will get notified by this annotation. That's why the annotation has this prefix Kuadrant IO. The Kuadrant controller will get notified by this annotation and will configure the gateway with the rate limit policy defined. Done. So in order to verify the creation of this rate limiting, or not the creation, in order to verify that rate limit policy has some effect, before checking it with actual request, we can check that the gateway has been configured with rate limiting rules. And in order to do that, we check the envoy filters, which is the Istio way to configure the rate limiting gateway. So here we have, as expected, the 2 gateway envoy filters. I'm not going into deep detail about those, but the only existence of those means that Kuadrant tries to configure the gateway for the rate limiting. Okay, and also our rate limit rate limiting service is Limitador, as you know. So we need to configure Limitador as well. And for configuring Limitador, the Kuadrant controller should have created rate limit custom resources. So let's see if they are created. I'm not going into detail of each one, but you see 4 rate limiting rules. Those are the 4 rate limiting rules I just explained in the rate limiting policy. Okay, for unauthenticated rate limiting, for authenticated rate limiting for Bob, authenticated rate limiting for Alice, and a global rate limiting. So those are the 4 rate limits. So let's verify that it's the unauthenticated rate limiting works. Because as a reminder, we didn't add any authentication. We cannot authenticate requests. So what we can do so far is unauthenticated rate limiting. So let's see. So if I request the toy, get toy, one, it's correct, it's working. Second one is working. But if you remember the rate limit policy, we said that get toy only has 2 every 30 seconds. So the third one should fail, and it's failing. It's failing with 4 to 9 too many requests. If we wait for 30 minutes, 30 seconds, sorry, it should be working again for only 2 requests. So let's add some authentication. We are going to make the system a little bit more complex. We add authentication. Authentication is provided by Authorino. So we need to do 2 things. One is configure Authorino for our toy store, and second thing is to tell the gateway that we want authentication in the pipeline of the HTTP and an HTTP filter. So that's done using the authorization policy of Istio. So let's go. First thing, Authorino configuration. The Authorino configuration, I'm not going into detail, but just to let you know that for the domain that we are working, we are going to define API key based authentication. For the demos, the easiest way to do this is API keys, because the key is stored in a secret. So we don't need integration with any OpenIDC Connect or OAuth provider. So API keys will be stored in secrets. So I will show you the secrets also as well. Here, the secret for Bob. The secret for Bob, the key will be Bob key for demo. And the secret for Alice, I will create two API keys, which is Alice key for demo. So I will create the auth config Authorino CR and the 2 API keys secrets. Okay, let's do that. One thing also worth mentioning is that we are configuring Authorino. So in the response of the authentication, it will return the user ID of the associated to that key. So one thing is the key, and then there is a user ID associated to that key. That association, this is implementation detail, but I think it's worth mentioning. That association is done using one annotation in the secret. Okay, this is not the only way to do this, but this is the way for this demo, we define this association from a key to a user ID. Okay, this is for Alice, and this is for Bob. Okay, so let's deploy all these manifests, the auth config, and the 2 secrets. The auth config, Bob's secret, and Alice's secret. Good. So Authorino has been configured. Secrets are in place. What we need is to tell the gateway to apply authentication in the process of when the request arrives. So that's done again using a cool feature of the Kuadrant control plane, which is we annotate the virtual service that we want to protect with authorization. We say we want this we want this service to be authenticated. So in order to do that, we annotate the virtual service. So done. Sorry, it's done. So the control plane will be notified of this annotation, and will know the control plane will deploy the authorization policy required for that. So let's verify that the authorization policy has been created. So it's there. So let's verify the authentication. First, we are going to try the one a request without any authentication. No authentication at all. We got the 401 unauthorized. If we add the key, in this case, the key is for Alice key for demo, you get access to the service. If you change, if I change the API key for something else, we shouldn't be allowed. Sorry, we shouldn't be allowed to access. Oops, something. Yeah, exactly. Shouldn't be allowed to access. So far, we added authentication. Next thing is to test the rate limit, the authenticated rate limit per user. So if we have a look back to the rate limit policy was defined that for Bob and the route called add toy, which is the post to the admin toy, the add toy operation. For Bob, it's only allowed 2 requests every 30 seconds. And for Alice, it's 4 requests every 30 seconds for the same route. Okay, so let's test this. I will run 2 requests for Bob, and then it should be rate limited. So Bob is, do it again, copy pasting. So I'm going to run for, oh, this is Alice. Okay, I'm going for Bob. Yeah, Bob. We said 2 requests for Bob and 4 requests for Alice. So 2 requests for Bob. This is for Bob. 1, 2, rate limited. So if we go for Alice, 1, 2, 3, 4, rate limited. Work it. So that's so far the demo. Anybody has a question about it? Anything you want to ask?
Maybe I just close the video there, Istio, and we'll answer the questions.